tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings. Good evening to everybody. We've come together tonight particularly because of it's the Katina Robe offering ceremony, which is an annual event. It can only be performed for a period within the period of 1 month after the end of the annual range retreat, which finished mid-October. So there's about 1 week left of what we call the Katina season, where Buddhists, faithful Buddhists all over the world will be coming together like yourselves tonight to bring cloth, fabric to monasteries where it can be offered to the Sangha, where there's been a Sangha of 5 monks or more living together, and they can hold a ceremony and offer the cloth and then choose a monk for receiving that cloth, and then it can be made into a robe and presented later in that day. Say tomorrow it will be presented, the finished robe, to complete that ceremony. And it's interesting that this ceremony and practice, procedure, comes from the Vinaya, the monastic discipline. And there's many rules and guidelines to do with the offering of Katina robes, and then how the Sangha receives it and performs the ceremony for themselves, how they sew it into a robe. And those rules, guidelines haven't changed since the time of the Buddha. So there's a certain link back to the time of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago. So I don't know how many pandemics the world has been through for 2,500 years, but we've certainly had a few in history. There's been bubonic plague, there's been Spanish flu, now there's been coronavirus. But we're still performing Katina ceremonies. People are still out of faith coming to Buddhist monasteries all over the world offering cloth at this time of year. So there's a certain continuity of practice, continuity of faith, continuity of good karma, good Dhamma being performed throughout history right up to the present day, even though the world as a whole, or society as a whole, goes through different experiences such as pandemics, wars, earthquakes, floods, many different dangers, inconveniences, problems that human beings have to face. The whole point of the Buddha's teaching, whether it's for the Sangha, he established a Sangha of monks and nuns who keep the Vinaya, the monastic discipline, or the laity as a whole. The point or the purpose of the teachings was to give us a way, a method or a vehicle to help free ourselves from stress, from suffering, ultimately from the round of rebirth we call samsara. And that teaching is still with us today, and the practice is still with us today. The Vinaya of the Sangha is still practiced, as in this monastery, as in many other monasteries. The teachings of the Eightfold Noble Path, the Four Noble Truths, are still in place in the world. They're still available to us. Even in times of crisis like pandemics, or whether it's a personal crisis, people go through their own personal problems and difficulties in life, or whether it's global, doesn't matter. The teachings are still here, available for us in this day and age, which is something to celebrate, be happy about. So the Katina time is a bit like a reminder that the Vinaya training, the Dhamma teaching is still alive and well, ready for us to practice and make use of. Even though the Buddha himself lived a long time ago, the teaching and the truth that it's pointing to is still there, ready for us to benefit from. So that's our good fortune. So every time there's a Katina ceremony, we can rejoice that there are still these teachings available to us. However much difficulty we have personally in our life, health problems, money problems, relationship problems, or however much difficulty there is in society as a whole, conflict, misunderstanding, competition, suffering, on whatever level, these teachings are still here available for us to practice. As we have been tonight, we've come together, we've meditated, we've chanted in praise of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, we've chanted together the Paritas, these verses of protection, and now we're listening to Dhamma talk. All of this is something that I hope brings you happiness, but it's a kind of subtle inner peace, inner happiness, a feeling of joy, a feeling of rejoicing and happiness that comes up through the practice. Whatever aspect of the practice it is, that's one of the immediate benefits you get from practicing Buddhism. Is that quite often it helps you to relax, feel happier in yourself, whatever else is going on in life, in the world. But it also takes effort. The Buddha founded his teachings on the principles of karma, cause and effect, cause and result. And if we are to experience happiness and get beyond our suffering, well, we have to create the causes for that through our own effort, what we call right effort in Buddhism. That's the effort to prevent unskillful states of mind that haven't yet arisen from arising. And the effort to abandon those unskillful states of mind that have arisen. And the effort to bring up, give rise to skillful states of mind. And the effort to preserve, develop further, cultivate those skillful states of mind, or the ones that have arisen. These are what we call the Foreright efforts in Buddhism. And everything we do falls into that model. Say we're practicing tonight, it takes effort to come to the monastery, say, just to be here. It takes effort to sit and meditate and train your mind in mindfulness or vipassana. It takes effort to chant, to remember the words, to learn the words, to recollect the meaning of the words. It takes effort to listen to a Dhamma talk, just to sit and focus your mind, concentrate your mind on the words. and so on. To do good takes effort, but the result is that our mind starts to improve. These good mental states, good actions that we put effort into bring their results. Sometimes in very small, subtle ways, sometimes in very profound, deep ways. But it does require our own effort. There's a story very well known in Buddhist circles that sort of displays this about a couple, man and woman, what we call a Brahmin couple in the time of India, in the time of the Buddha. Many people were called Brahmins. And they were religious people, but this particular couple were very poor. They had nothing, literally living from hand to mouth, stuck in poverty. But they had great faith in the Buddha and his teachings. So in one sense they were wealthy, because they're wealthy in faith. And that brought them a lot of joy, and they would go to see the Buddha so they could listen to the Dhamma and learn how to practice. And they got a lot of joy from that. But they were so poor, they only had one piece of cloth between the two of them. So only one of them could leave the house at a time, out of shame. It'd be too embarrassing to go around naked, so they had to take it in turns, which brought them some sadness, because they both wanted to go and see the Buddha, to hear the Dhamma, but they had to take it in turns. So one would go during the day, the wife would go in the daytime, the husband would stay at home, and the husband would go in the evening time to listen to Dhamma, like yourselves tonight. And sometimes the people, like in these days as well, they would listen to Dhamma and stay and practice all night in the monastery, out of faith. And there was one occasion the husband was there, and he'd heard the Buddha speak. He's full of joy and faith. He was just staying all night, and the thought arose after listening to the Dhamma, I should really offer this cloth to the Buddha. I've got nothing else, no money, no possessions, but this one piece of cloth is all I've got, but I should offer it to the Buddha, the Sangha, make an offering of Sangha Dana with the Buddha at the head. This is the correct thing to do. It'd be such a joyful thing to do. But then a moment later he had a doubt enter the mind. No. I've only got one piece of cloth. What will I do? I'll have nothing left. My wife won't have anything. I won't have anything. No, I can't. And that began a sort of a battle, a Dhamma battle. For the rest of the night he was sitting there, part of the mind saying, I'm going to offer this cloth. The other part saying, no, don't do that. And there was literally a mental battle went on for the rest of the night. And they say it was a battle between faith, generosity, letting go of attachment, and attachment, stinginess, possessiveness, worry. So it's a battle between the good and the bad, the wholesome mental states and the unwholesome mental states, which we experience every day as human beings. And every day we have these little battles. Sometimes it's just for a few moments. Sometimes, like in the case of the Brahmin, it was all night long he was battling between his desire to do something good, make an offering to the Buddha, and then the doubt and the possessiveness which was holding him back. This teaches us something very important, is that the human mind, it's never fixed. The more you practice the Dhamma, you listen to the Dhamma, you meditate, you practice mindfulness, the more aware you become that our mind is like a chain of individual moments of consciousness, which are individual mental states. So we have many thoughts. Each moment of consciousness is a separate moment. It has its own feeling, perception, its own thought formation. So of course it's possible for you one moment to have a very good thought, and the next to have a complete opposite thought. You can have a moment of kindness followed by a moment of anger, a moment of compassion followed by a moment of hatred, a moment of generosity followed by a moment of stinginess and attachment. And probably all of us know this, don't we? When you're meditating, you'll have moments when you're bringing up mindfulness, and then moments when you lose it and you become distracted or sleepy or lost in your thoughts and moods. This is what we call Dhamma practice. It's basically the effort to bring up the wholesome, preserve it, develop it and cultivate it, versus the effort of what we call the mental defilements, the kilesas, who have their own effort out of habit and out of past experience. The kilesas are often leading our mind, and the unwholesome mental states of the kilesas, rooted in greed, anger, delusion, selfishness, fear, worry, and all their different sort of accompanying mental states, they're often winning, aren't they? They're often the ones that fill the mind. Because you look back at your life, there's been more moments when you haven't been practicing the Dhamma than when you have been practicing, for most people, unless you're coming to the end of your practice, like someone getting close to Nibbana. Well, then their mind is filled up with the Dhamma through all their efforts in the practice, and they may only have very few, very rare moments where the kilesa come in. But for most of us, the kilesa are the ones on top, and they're filling up our mind all the time. And then there's moments where we put effort into the Dhamma practice and slip in, the Dhamma slips in or fills the mind. The mindfulness arises, the wisdom comes up, the patience, the compassion, all the wholesome brightening, the qualities that brighten the mind come in. And the kilesas, the darker qualities that bring us stress, suffering in their different ways, they fade away. But then they return. It's not like a one-off battle and that's the end of the war. It's a succession of battles every day, isn't it? Between greed and selfishness, between anger and kindness, between patience and impatience, and so on. These little battles are going on all the time, just like for that Brahmin on the night where he decided to offer a piece of cloth to the Buddha. It was a night of battle, struggle. Sometimes we come together to meditate through the night, and you may not have the thought to offer cloth or robes, but you have just the battle between sleepiness, say, or apathy, or a mind that's racing, full of worries, problems in your life coming up, or regrets. All depends. But for the Brahmin that night, it was a battle between the desire to make an offering and the desire not to. Yes, no, yes, no. All through the night, they say. He struggled. But by dawn, or just before dawn, he made his final determination. I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm going to do it. He set aside his doubts, his attachments, his stinginess, and he went to the Buddha and laid this piece of cloth at the feet of the Buddha, over the feet, out of respect and out of the wish to support the Buddha and the Sangha. And at that moment he cried out, victory. He was so elated and so much joy of having finally conquered his own attachment. And of course, for someone with nothing to give away their last possession, that's an amazing thing. It's not, for most people to give away an item of clothing maybe is not so hard. But if that's all you've got, it's a big decision. It wasn't easy at all, and he gave away this piece of cloth. It's probably old and already tatty, but it's all he had. And it wasn't that he didn't care about his wife or him. He knew it was going to lead to hardship, but he thought, this is my chance to make an offering to the Buddha. So he did it. And so he shouted victory many times. He was so happy, elated. And a lot of people heard this and they all sort of stopped. You can imagine if it was a night of all-night meditation and someone starts shouting, "Victory, victory," in the morning, that wakes everyone up, doesn't it? They come out of their drowsy state and say, what's going on here? So everyone was watching the Buddha and watching this Brahmin, and he's going, "Victory, victory." And so everyone heard about it and they all asked, "Well, what's going on here? Why is this guy shouting victory?" And then someone explained, they kind of worked out what had gone on. Oh, he's offered this only possession, this piece of cloth, to the Buddha. He's had a victory over his own mind, his own stinginess. And this news got to the king, King Pasenadi of Kosala, who had great faith in the Buddha as well, was obviously super rich. And he also heard that this man had been shouting victory, victory. He wanted to know why, what it's all about. And they explained, he asked one of his staff and they said, well, he's offered his only possession to the king, to the Buddha. He's conquered his mind, he's conquered his greed, his attachment. He's had a victory. And the king was so impressed because he knew what it meant. He's a wise king on many levels. He knew a lot of people very poor, and to give away your only possession is an amazing thing. So he's so inspired by the strength of this man's faith. He said, quick, get some cloth. Kings always have lots of cloth handy. So he got his guy to bring a few pieces of cloth. He knew the man had a wife, so he bought 2 sets of cloth for them, clothing for them, and quickly brought it to the Brahmin. And the servant said, this is from the king. He's so inspired by your action. Please take this. And the Brahmin now was on a roll. He's let go of all attachment. He's so happy to have made his offering to the Buddha. He gets these 2 nice new pieces of cloth he's never had before. And he offers them to the Buddha. It's like, another chance. So he did it again, he offered. And then the king sent 4 pieces, offered them, 8 pieces of cloth, offered them. Whatever the king sent through, the Brahmin just offered to the Buddha. So finally, huge piles of cloth were coming in. The Brahmin just kept 2 pieces, one for himself, one for his wife, and then offered it all to the Buddha. And the king was so impressed. He said, this man has as much faith as me, because the king had previously offered large amounts of robes to the monks, food, whatever. He was supporting the Sangha. And this man, receiving this stuff for the first time in his life, he's become wealthy, but straight away giving it to the Sangha. And the king said, well, this man has the same level of faith as me. So he got the best cloth from his palace. Kings always have fancy tapestries and rugs and all kinds of stuff. So he got the best cloth and sent it down to this man. He said, oh, so inspiring, your level of faith. And he offered that to the king, to the Buddha, and said, can I offer you this cloth for your ceiling in your kuti? Because kutis in those days, sometimes these days as well, but more in those days, they're made of straw and timber, and sometimes they're a bit dusty. So they'd have these, if it was a well-supported monk or a well-supported kuti, they'd have a ceiling made of very fancy cloth, like a rug, strung up to stop dust falling on the Buddha or the monk. So this best quality rug was put up into the Buddha's kuti. And later the king came to pay respects to the Buddha, and he saw this rug. He knew exactly where it had come from. He said, this is what I offered to that guy, and he's given it to you. Oh. He was impressed again, and he realized whatever this guy gets, he's going to offer to the Buddha. So after that, he said, okay, I'm going to set him up. So he set him up as a farmer, gave him land, cows, cattle, crops, all that he needed to be rich. So the man went from being one of the poorest to one of the wealthiest in the neighborhood out of his inspiration to offer cloth to the Buddha. The important thing of the story, the moral of the story, or the important point is the victory over his own mind. He said, "Jitang me," which means victory. I've won victory over my mind. I've conquered my mind. Even in extreme poverty, his faith was so strong he could give, he could share, which is not easy. I don't know how you could compare it today. Maybe it might be if you had a house, you owned your house, not mortgaged to the bank, you owned it, and you offered it to the Buddha maybe. That's all you had, but you offered it to the Buddha. That'd be a similar sort of thing, wouldn't it? It's all you've got, and you give it away to support the Buddha, the Sangha. It's that level of faith where you just give everything out of faith, and you get joy from it. No doubt, no second thoughts. The mind gets the joy of letting go, of attachment. Sometimes the teachers say, what do they have to do to attain jhana? Practice meditation, samadhi, attain jhana. And they have a saying, they have to be able to give away a house. It's the equivalent. And if you're going to attain samadhi through your meditation practice, you have to give away everything, don't you? At least mentally. Physically, maybe not, but you probably would have physically given away a lot to get to that point where you can attain samadhi. But mentally, it's as if you've given away all that you own. If you're going to bring your mind to a state of calm, settle down, one-pointed on an object, it means you have to let go of all your senses, doesn't it? Sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. People, all the people you love, the possessions that you have, your prized possession, your favorite item of clothing, your favorite computer game, your favorite tool, your favorite bit of technology, favorite car, favorite house, whatever. Mentally, you've got to have let that go, put it down if you're going to enter a state of samadhi. Which is why we can't do it yet. Why is samadhi hard to develop? We can develop a little bit maybe, and that's good. But why can't we fully enter a state of samadhi and absorb into the mind? It's because we're still stuck on things, aren't we? We're still attaching to this person and what they said, and that person, what they're going to do, and this one I like, and that one I don't like. And we're attached to our future and what I want from the future, all the things I want to get, and all the things I want to avoid. We're stuck in the past, carrying along all our memories. This happened and that happened, and I'm not happy about it, or I'm really happy and I want to get back there. All of that's what stops you entering a state of samadhi, isn't it? What you carry along in your mind. You have to learn to let it go, put it down. And that's what we do when we meditate. So it's like they say, it's like the equivalent of giving away your house. It's literally letting go of everything is what you're practicing. That's why we practice generosity, charity, compassion in daily life, whether it's material charity and sharing things we have with people, the giving of forgiveness when people have hurt us or we're not happy with them, letting go of that anger, that hatred, the giving of Dhamma, bringing your mind in line with the Dhamma so you can actually share the Dhamma with people rather than sharing mental defilements, greed, anger and delusion with people. And this is what we're practicing, training the mind in, we say, sila, samadhi, panya, and particularly developing mindfulness, letting go of craving and attachment. Another way of describing samadhi is, when you've let go of your craving, even though deep down you may still have attachments, but temporarily you let go of your desires, don't you? So your mind enters a state of freedom, you could say, not bothered by anything, at least for a while. While you're in that state of samadhi, you're happy, you're calm, your mind is free from its normal thinking and attachment. It's still awake, it's aware, knows things, but it's not caught up in the usual thought processes and reactions of like and dislike that we're normally caught into. So this practice of letting go, we do it on every level, whether it's the level of material, letting go through the practice of charity, generosity, helping out, on the level of mentally letting go of our anger, our greed, our worries, our sleepiness. Even letting go of sleepiness is a form of letting go, isn't it? It's dana. You're giving it away. You're not giving in to that sleepiness. You're saying, no, you can't stay in my mind, sleepiness. Out you go. Maybe that's your victory for today, is the victory over your own sleepiness. Or it could be the victory over your irritation if your body is giving you some grief, pain in the legs, pain in the back, feel tired, and it's making you feel annoyed with yourself or the world, feeling restless, impatient. Maybe that's your victory for today, just settling your mind, letting go of the irritation to do with your body, physical feelings and so on. Or it could be something that's happened in your day that you're just carrying around, some regret over something you said, some dissatisfaction with what happened with someone else or the world around you. Maybe that's what you have to gain your victory over and let it go. But when we do let go, the mind settles down, doesn't it? So if you're practicing meditation, say with the breathing, when can you stay with the breath? And when you let go of everything else? You literally have to practice putting down everything that you attach to. Well, why do we do that? Well, because we gain a lot of happiness in the process. It's actually good for us to practice letting go. It brings joy. You let go of a moment of greed, you're released from that, so you feel joy. You let go of a moment of anger, there's some joy there. If you join up those small moments, the joy, the release, the happiness starts to become something more tangible for you. It becomes an experience that maybe lasts with you for quite a long time. Most importantly of all, it helps us to develop insight, vipassana. When you're practicing letting go, it's just teaching you something, isn't it? It's teaching your mind that you can let go of greed, anger, delusion, fear, worry, jealousy. Therefore, those things you've let go of are not really you. Sometimes we're a bit depressed or disappointed. We say, well, I know it's going to return. I let go of my anger now. I forgave them, but I know it will come back. But before you go into that more negative, cynical mode, just stop and appreciate that you have let go. If you've managed to let go of some anger, enjoy the moment. Because it's teaching you that anger is not really you. It's not self. That's what we call anatta, or the practice of not self. When your mind goes to an experience of emptiness, which is what samadhi is, it's empty of greed, empty of anger, empty of self. This self-view that we've been holding on to normally, that fuels all the confusion and suffering in our mind. If you temporarily let that go, you feel very good. And you're teaching yourself, these things can be let go of because they're not permanent, they're not self. They're anicca, dukkha, anatta. They're to be let go of. And the more you practice, the more you want to let go, because this is not true happiness. Clinging on to my greed, it only leads to a disturbed, unsatisfied state of mind, leads to discontent. Greed and attachment is not something that pacifies your mind and brings you joy and happiness. It stirs you up, doesn't it? I've got to get this to be happy. If I don't have it, I'm going to be miserable. Anger is the same. Not getting what you want leads to anger, doesn't it? When people don't do what you want, don't say what you want, things don't go the way you want, you get angry. It's not peaceful though. So letting go of your anger leads to happiness. Seeing anger as impermanent, as not self, not a person, a being, me or you. It's just a mental state that can be put down if we practice enough. That's teaching you that, oh, these things that cause me stress and suffering can be put down. They're not really me. They're not inherent in the mind. They're temporary mental states, and they can be replaced by something better. It's going back to this idea that our mind is constantly experiencing moments of consciousness, moments of mental states, good and bad. And the more we develop the skillful, wholesome ones, the less the unskillful, unwholesome ones take over the mind. The freer we are, the happier we are, and the better our wisdom functions, the more clearly we can see. You can see, oh, this anger, this greed I've been bothered by, now I've let it go, and you feel very good. Just like the Brahmin, it's like a victory, so you feel really happy that you've had a victory over your mind. Could be one small victory. You take what you can, don't you? A small victory is better than no victory. Sometimes it may be a very deep, profound victory where you finally abandon some greed or abandon some hatred. Maybe somebody has been really bringing you a lot of anger, thinking about them, maybe for months or even years, and you finally set it aside. It's like the sweetest victory, isn't it? You know, oh, I don't have to get angry anymore over that person. They used to bother me, now they don't. Or that thing that brought up greed so many times, and you finally seen through the obsession and said, no, this is not going to bother me anymore. And you really have let it go. Doesn't bother you, doesn't disturb your mind. It could be any aspect of your life, but letting go of the mental defilements brings release. There's a happiness with that release. And it's teaching you that you can do it, so that it gives you the energy to try again, do it again, repeat the action. And of course we have setbacks in the practice. That Brahmin, he took all night to come to his decision. It wasn't an easy thing. Much of our practice is like that. We have our little successes, and then we fall back, miserable again, unhappy again, attached again. So there's this back and forth. But if you keep going, you understand more how to do the practice. So you get a little bit wiser, and it gets a little bit easier to let go. And it's not something that, sometimes we just think that there are those people who can just naturally practice what the Buddha taught. It's easy for them. And then there's the rest of us who can't, and struggle and give up and find it so difficult. That's not the case, is it? If those people seem to find it easier and they're getting a lot of peace and understanding from their practice, it's because they've tried. They put effort in, they've tried, they've practiced. And so through experience, they've understood how to look after the mind and let go of some of the greed and anger. So they feel happier. And if we haven't yet done it, it's because we haven't done it enough. We need to do it more. We need to keep coming back, motivating ourselves to keep developing skillful states of mind, bringing them up to counter the unskillful states of mind. Not to give in when you make mistakes, when you give in to your own kilesas and I've fallen into my greed again, I lost my temper again, I was sleepy in my meditation again. Okay, these things happen, but don't give in to the point where you just give up the practice. Just accept, yes, sometimes it's difficult. There are challenges. Sometimes the Dhamma wins, sometimes the kilesas win. But as long as you keep going, you learn, you'll get better at overcoming the kilesas. And as you get better at it, you understand what the problems are. So you can see kilesas coming from a distance. You say, there's more greed, I'm not going for that anymore, I don't want that anymore, it's suffering. If you can see the suffering in greed, anger and delusion, you want to let it go. You won't want to follow it. Why do we keep suffering in life? It's because we still doubt. We're not clear yet that the way of greed, anger and delusion is the way leading to suffering. We have our doubts that maybe it's leading to happiness. If I get what I want, then I'll be happy. But we're missing that, we're following greed maybe when we do that. So if you can separate the mind out, you may well sometimes get what you want. But what you're doing is separating out the greed and recognizing if I follow greed, there's suffering. This is a tricky one to see, isn't it? Many people become frustrated and they say, okay, greed is the enemy. I'm not going to have any greed, any attachment, so I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to go to work because that would be greedy for money. I'm not going to buy anything because that would be greedy for possessions. I'm just going to sit here and fade away. Sometimes we think like that, but it's not practical, it's not realistic. We still have to live in the world. We still have to eat. We still have to go to work, earn money maybe. But what you're doing is contemplating your experience and recognizing greed for what it is and seeing how it comes into your actions and your activities. It's possible to still go to work but be letting go of your greed as you do it. You can still earn money because you have to use money to buy things and live in this world. But as you do it, you let go of your greed. What are the telltale signs of greed? Well, when you go to work, you start maybe competing with other people, become more insensitive to others because you only got your own desires and the things you want, and you become more obsessed with your own desires to the point where maybe you hurt other people, take advantage of them. That's where greed is coming into your behavior. As they say, we sort of climb, when we're following greed, we climb on top of each other. When we practice generosity, we've got space in our mind to consider others and be more sensitive to others, maybe let them go first or share what we have with them, help them. It's a totally different mental experience, isn't it? Same with anger. When we go to work, if we give into anger, well, we start taking our anger out on others, people around us maybe. We complain about them. Usually it's behind their back. We're not brave enough to their face, but it's not worth doing it to their face anyway. It just leads to conflict. But we do it behind their back, don't we? We complain, we stab them in the back. We do things, or maybe we don't do things. Maybe because we're angry, we don't do something that we're supposed to do. But when you let go of your anger, what's it like? When you've got that little victory, you've let go of your anger, you forgive them, you develop goodwill, you're more tolerant of yourself, tolerant of them. You feel much more relaxed, much better. Even if someone else is behaving wrongly or badly, you can shake it off. You don't want it to disturb your good state of mind. So you don't take ownership of their bad behavior. You don't blame them and get caught into criticism or looking down on them or getting angry with them. You just know, they're still doing things wrong, maybe in one way or another. But you don't let that become a cause for anger in your own heart. You keep your goodwill. Maybe you feel sorry for them, or you wish them to improve, to change, but you don't get angry because you can see that anger is toxic, it's poison to your own mind, and you don't want that. So practicing like this doesn't mean to say, as a Buddhist, practicing letting go of greed or anger, that you stop doing anything. You can't do anything in life anymore. You still can do many things, but you're also practicing with your mind as you do those things. Recognizing the kilesa, greed, anger, delusion, letting them go. This is the way we achieve peace, freedom. So, as I was saying, we're all here for the Katina celebration, to practice. This is the best way to celebrate Katina time, is do some practice on every level. Generosity, morality, samadhi, wisdom, insight. And we're practicing together today, and then tomorrow these pieces of cloth and other gifts that people bring tomorrow will be offered. So hopefully everyone can shout victory tomorrow, victory over an attachment of one kind or another, letting it go, cultivating wholesome states of mind, experiencing more happiness from the practice. That's what we wish for each other. So for tonight, I certainly wish you all happiness, and may you all experience the benefits of the practice and let go of your kilesas and have victory over them and find true peace, true happiness in your heart. So I wish you all the best.